Hello, all. This is the most takes I've ever had to do. Um, because I think I'm a little nervous about sharing this one. And not to say that I wasn't nervous, talking about the gray area, when I talked about Dickens and experiencing life with a senior horse. But I guess this one maybe hits home a little bit more on a vulnerable level. Um, where I knew anyone who loves a horse could relate to what I was saying in that post, or that episode. But this one maybe just hits home on a bit more intimate level, which sounds funny to say because I talked about my PTSD in that episode as well. Um, but yeah, anyways, this one just hits a little bit different. But I want to share it anyways because I am sure there are people who can relate anyways. And I don't think things like this get talked about enough without shame attached, potential shame attached. But I just saw a post on Instagram that I remember seeing. It would have been like probably like 3 years ago, the same concept, and it was not the same post, but I remember I saw it before I started really deep diving into my therapy era, if you will. And it was interesting to me to see the difference. It still like immediately gripped my heartstrings. And I could still feel it so deeply, but in such a different way, in such a different reaction than when I saw it previously. Um, and the post that I saw on Instagram was, "It feels so good knowing that little me would run to a woman like me for help." And that wasn't the phrasing that I remember seeing a couple of years ago. It was more knowing like the younger me would feel safe with the adult that I've become. And I remember seeing that before all of the work that I've done to continue to enhance my emotional intelligence. And my initial reaction was like, hell yeah, like I I don't take shit from anybody. I absolutely became this super strong person that young me would feel safe with. And now I just feel it in such a different, um, not necessarily that same, like, I won't let anyone hurt you sort of thing, because that's still very much there, but it's a much more nurturing sensation that I feel of like, I will take care of you instead of I won't let anyone hurt you. It's I will fiercely take care of you. Um, and I think the shift with that um, comes from a lot of the work that I've done in therapy, surrounding like that inner child work. And I remember my therapist is brilliant. Um, and really took a long time to circle around to that because initially the concept of like, oh, if I could just give little Megan a hug, I would. Like, I wish I could go back and give little Megan a hug. And I would like sit there looking at her like, this is so cringy. I hate this so much. But with that being said, there's so much that I've worked around to see the world through my 7, 8-year-old self and how I perceived the world then. And as an adult, being able to see what I needed that I didn't get. And I don't know how people um, share so much about their intimate self on podcasts and on the internet in general. And I know it's because people can relate, but like literally my first thought is like, I don't want anyone in my life to be offended um, by me saying that there were things, needs of mine that were not met when I was a kid. Because if anyone knows my parents, they are the bomb and they are so loving and were absolutely fantastic parents put in a really shitty, impossible situation with all of the medical stuff that was thrown at me when I was younger and then when they were younger. And a huge part of me acknowledges that that was their first time doing life too. Our parents are literally just figuring this out as we do as well. But it's taken me a really long time to be able to say, yes, they were absolutely the best parents ever, but no, not all of the things that I needed were met. And here is how those show up in my adult life, in my adult relationships. Um, and it shows up in, especially when it comes to those in my life that feel vulnerable. And I hate that word. We have deemed that the V word in all of my therapy sessions because it just makes, like, even just like vulnerable, like saying that makes me uncomfortable because that's how much I hate feeling vulnerable and feeling like I'm put in situations where I'm vulnerable. But even seeing how uncomfortable I am with feeling that and with experiencing that, and then how that has showed up in my day-to-day life as an adult is it just shows to me and proves to me why it is so important to go back and do that inner child work of what did little Megan need. I can't say it without laughing. I can't. But in like there have been social situations where someone has been like, oh, I can't go talk to her about that. Like that makes me so uncomfortable. And I'm like, fuck that. I'm not scared of her. I'll go have that conversation for you. And literally just not wanting anyone in my life to feel like they are vulnerable or that they are scared to go and do something. Um, and also backs up and makes so much sense. Like, yes, I love animals, but when I show up so fiercely as their advocate and as their caretaker, I take care of my animals in the way I wish someone took care of me. And again, not to say that my needs were not met, but from that fierce protectiveness and that I will show up for you no matter what, um, it it speaks to what I needed from an adult in my life when I was younger. And to see that play out of I have made myself into the adult that I needed when I was younger is on the one hand kind of sad, I want to say. Just it's so it's just so interesting. And like one of the things, one of the reasons this is my second take of this episode, because my brain is just so scrambled of sharing this information. But one of the things that I kept saying and kept pissing myself off because I said it so much was it's so interesting. But it is, I find all of it fascinating. I find life fascinating in how there was a gap in my needs and I made myself into the thing that fills that gap. Um, and it's like talking to other people, sometimes they find that in their partner, and I'm sure I have in some ways. But instead of outsourcing, I made myself into that. And instead of repeating some of the same patterns that I grew up with, I went like a hard right in how I do life with a lot of things. So a lot of that comes down to looking at your childhood, and God forbid when we get to my teenage therapy that that will we have quite a few things to dissect in that. But for now, just talking about younger Megan who needed someone to fiercely protect her energy and her emotional well-being. And I have become that for myself sometimes, like sometimes to the extreme. And I am so grateful for my brain to be able to have figured out so quickly and at such a young age how to dissociate from that. Because honestly, I'm not sure I would not be where I am in my life today at all if my brain hadn't figured out how to protect me from that. Now that I'm in a better place in life with all of that, it's easier for me to figure out how to slowly start to creep out of that survival mode. Um, and that's a challenge. Like I can do survival mode really well. And going back to things that I talked about in the gray area episode of this whole summer for me was survival mode, but on behalf of my unwell senior gelding versus a personal attack on me. And for those of you who might not know, I did end up putting him down in September with more eye ulcers, and he started to have some foot things too. But I'm I was devastated, obviously, by that and losing him. But there's also a part of me, relief isn't quite the right word, but I realized like it was 2 weeks after I lost him that my brain fog started to lift. And at that point, I was like, holy shit, my body and my brain went right back to, we are under attack, we are under siege. And I knew that at the time that that's what I was experiencing, but it's like to have that trigger lifted, and to not go to sleep worrying about him, to not wake up worrying about him, and having that consume my whole being. Like again, like I always feel like I need to justify it. I love that horse with my whole heart. I don't think I need to explain that to anybody, but I still always feel the need to, because I feel badly to say that my quality of life has improved since I lost him. But I had very much taken on that caretaker role, physically, emotionally, like in every way. And being able to step back out of that now and like looking at my cortisol face, looking at all of the signs that my body is deep into emotionally embedded stress and very much hooked into survival mode, and has been for a long time on behalf of my horse, not necessarily on behalf of me, even though him being unwell was an attack on my emotional well-being. But I have shifted my focus so much on trying to take care of myself and put myself first, which is a very brand new concept for me. But I look at how deeply and how fiercely I took care of him, and being able to relate that back to, that's how I wanted or needed someone to take care of me. And again, not to say that I wasn't well taken care of. I always feel the need to throw that in there because I haven't worked through that part of therapy yet. Because I still haven't been able to just leave it as a full stop, full sentence. But with that piece of mental health, it's so important to take that time to reflect with, I would say, like with support of someone who you need support with that. If therapy isn't necessarily accessible to you, then you need to find someone else who can offer their support through that. But to have someone take a look at your actions, at how you perceive your childhood, and to be able to dissect that a little further of, hey, this is how you experienced that world. This is what I'm hearing happened. And this is what I'm hearing you did to cope with that. It's mind blowing. And you can look at relationships in your world and how that has affected it. Because of course it did. That's how we grew up. That's how we learned to perceive the world. But on that notion of taking care of yourself, it's, yeah, I did not take care of myself this summer. I was solely invested in the purpose of my gelding. And I knew that, but I didn't know that to the extent that I can see that and feel that in my body now. And I'll also add, I feel like I am very proud of myself for how I grieved the loss of him, and still obviously continue to grieve. But I like through that, through the process of therapy, I have allowed myself more grace and have allowed myself opportunities to feel things that I certainly, historically speaking, losing him would have been another attack of putting me into survival mode. And he's he was my motivation to keep living in really dark times in my life. And I was terrified of what that would look like when I did lose him, because he was a senior gelding who had several underlying health conditions. And then, yeah, it was terrifying to put my emotional well-being on that. But I'm very proud of myself for giving myself space to grieve. Like, I took the rest of the week off when I lost him. Historically, I would not have done that. I would have never taken time off of work for my emotional health. And I really used to historically only take time off for my physical health if I was damn near close to dying. So I have grown in that sense of allowing myself time to feel all of those things and to just sit in it, as awful and as uncomfortable as it was. I I was able to let it go because I took the time to sit in it and to feel it. I was able to then part with that. And again, it's really, I'm not necessarily random, but sometimes it feels random of, I'll hear a line in a song or whatever, and it'll be like, oh, Dickens. but I, but it was time. And I think I take a lot of comfort in that knowing he's no longer in any pain or distress. And that kind of became like my go-to line for people, but I believe that wholeheartedly. And that has offered a lot of comfort. And now I have a new mare that like almost it almost felt like the universe gave her to me as a gift to be like, I'm so sorry. We took Dickens away from you too early. But she's lovely. She's she's a 20-year-old mare. So also a senior horse, but knock on wood, no underlying health conditions. And exactly what I was looking for. Like with all the shit that my body has been through, I want that to be a fun experience. I don't want to fear for my life every time I get into the saddle. I haven't been that rider. I don't know if I was ever truly that rider. Like, yes, I was a lot more fearless when I was younger. But I think I I hold my physical body to a higher regard than some people, which in one way probably makes me a little bit more of an anxious rider than others. But I own that. But anyways, I found I was handed this absolutely lovely little mare who has brought a lot of joy back into my life and reminded me that this is supposed to be fun. And it's been so fun getting to know her and getting to feel that joy of figuring out what she needs from me. And also knowing that she doesn't fully need me 3 times a day. Like today, I haven't gone out, nor will I go out because I had a great ride yesterday and she doesn't need anything from me today. And that's really liberating to remember that a lot of horse owners typically go out like, I don't know, 3 to 5 times a week, not 3 times a day. It's refreshing. Um, but yeah, back to that Instagram post, just to summarize it. Really fascinating to track your growth as a person, as an adult. And it was really stark for me, the difference of how I viewed the concept of becoming the adult that little me would feel safe with. It's very warm and fuzzy to view that, not just from an armor standpoint, that I have the armor now that younger me wished someone else could give her, instead of creating it for herself. But knowing now that it's not necessarily about the armor, it's also being able to take the armor off. And that's a really tricky spot to be in. It's scary because of the V word, because it's vulnerable. But it was so wonderful. The response I got from the Gray Area episodes, and I know any horse owner who has lost a horse can relate to that, but this one just seemed a little bit scarier for some reason, which is why I am just gonna go ahead and post it. Welcome to the equestrian lifestyle. Thanks for listening.